Benita stared at the ceiling of her small, dimly lit room. The fan wobbled as it spun, making a faint clinking sound that echoed in the silence. She lay on her thin mattress, her body still, but her mind raced. She was 28 now, and yet every year of her life felt like a heavy stone stacked on her chest. Each day passed the same way, quietly, unremarkably, and with a loneliness so deep that it sometimes took her breath away. Benita, what is wrong with you? Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. She was 13 the first time she heard those words. It wasn't a question, it was a judgment, a sharp blade disguised as concern. Her mother had been trying to get her to wear makeup for a family wedding. At least, look presentable. You're already, you know. What? Benita had asked, her voice barely audible. Her mother waved a hand dismissively, her tone casual but cutting. You are not exactly pretty. If you don't try, how will anyone notice you? Those words never left her. Now, in her adulthood, they still echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. She didn't hate her mother for saying them, but she hated herself for believing them. Every time she looked in the mirror, all she saw was a girl who wasn't enough. Her dark skin, wide nose, and full lips, features she now knew others celebrated, felt like a curse when she was growing up. Benita's childhood wasn't filled with warmth or praise. She grew up in a bustling household in Ibadan, the second of four children. Her older sister, Ada, was everything she wasn't: light skinned, slim, and endlessly charming. At family gatherings, people always praised Ada. Ada, fine girl, no pimples, Auntie Kemi would say, pinching her cheeks. Then she'd glance at Benita and frown slightly before forcing a weak compliment. Benita, you you are trying, Sha. One day, when she was 14, Benita overheard a conversation that would change her forever. She was coming back from school, her uniform dusty and her shoes scuffed. As she approached the kitchen, she heard her mother's voice. That girl, Benita, I don't know what to do with her, her mother said. What do you mean? It was her father's voice, low and tired. She's just plain. Even Ada says the boys don't notice her. And the way she walks, always hunched like she's hiding. I don't want her to end up alone. Benita froze. She pressed herself against the wall, her school bag slipping from her shoulder. She's still young, her father replied, his tone dismissive. Maybe she'll grow into herself. Her mother sighed. I hope so. I just, I wish she wasn't so awkward. She's so different from the others. Benita didn't cry that day. She walked quietly to her room, sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The words played over and over in her mind, carving themselves into her like a scar. Years later, when Benita was 17, she had a conversation with Ada that she would never forget. They were sitting in the living room, the television playing a Nollywood movie neither of them was watching. Ada, Benita began hesitantly. Hmm? Ada didn't look up from her phone. Do you think I'm ugly? Ada paused and glanced at her younger sister. For a moment, Benita thought she saw pity in her eyes. Then Ada sighed. Benita, it's not about being ugly or not. It's about confidence. Look at me. I'm not the most beautiful girl in the world, but I act like I am. That's what people like. Benita nodded slowly, but her chest tightened. But what if I don't feel confident? Ada shrugged. Then fake it. That's what I do. If you don't, people will treat you like you are invisible. That night, Benita stared at herself in the mirror. She tried to smile, to stand taller, to pretend she was someone else. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ada was wrong. It wasn't just about confidence, it was about something deeper, something she didn't have. Benita had always known she was different, but she couldn't quite put it into words. At 17, she had never had a boyfriend, which wasn't unusual in her conservative secondary school. But what stood out to her was that she had never wanted one. While her classmates giggled about crushes and traded notes with boys in the hallway, Benita felt like a bystander watching a game she didn't understand. She told herself it was because of her insecurities. Who would even like me? She often thought. But deep down, there was something more, something she didn't know how to name. Her path to discovery began on a hot afternoon after school. It was the last period, and everyone was itching to go home. As the teacher's voice droned on, Benita sat in the corner of the class, dawdling in her notebook. Benita, a soft voice called. She looked up to see Kemi, one of the popular girls, smiling down at her. Kemi had a presence that filled the room. Her laughter was infectious, and her confidence drew people to her like moths to a flame. Benita always felt invisible around girls like her. Yes, Benita answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Kemi pointed to her textbook. Can I borrow your notes for yesterday's class? I missed it. Okay, Benita mumbled, handing her the notebook. Kemi's fingers brushed against hers as she took it. And something strange happened. Benita felt her cheeks warm, and her heart skipped a beat. She quickly pulled her hand back, hoping Kemi didn't notice. Thanks, you're a lifesaver, Kemi said with a wide smile before walking away. For the rest of the day, Benita couldn't stop thinking about that brief moment. Her mind raced with questions. Why had she reacted that way? Why did her heart feel like it was pounding out of her chest? She had seen Kemi countless times before. So, why did this feel different? That evening, Benita sat on the floor of her room, her knees pulled to her chest. She had tried to distract herself with homework, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Kemi. What is wrong with me? She whispered to herself. She thought back to all the books she had read, the movies she had watched. The way women looked at men in those stories wasn't how she felt. But then, she remembered a scene from a Nollywood movie she had seen weeks ago. Two women had shared a lingering glance, their connection unspoken but electric. At the time, Benita had felt something stir in her, a strange mix of curiosity and yearning. Could it be possible? Could she feel that way about girls? The thoughts terrified her. Growing up in Nigeria, she had only ever heard people talk about love in one way, between a man and a woman. Anything else was whispered about in hushed tones or condemned outright. She had no one to ask, no one to guide her. All she had were her own tangled emotions, and even those felt like a betrayal of everything she was supposed to be. A week later, Benita found herself sitting alone in class during lunch. She often stayed behind while others crowded the cafeteria or played outside. It was easier that way. No one noticed her, and she didn't have to pretend to fit in. She was scribbling in her notebook when she heard footsteps approaching. Hey, Benita! Kemi's cheerful voice broke through the silence. Benita looked up, startled. Oh, hi! Why are you sitting here all alone? Kemi asked, sliding into the seat beside her. I I just like the quiet, Benita said, avoiding her gaze. Kemi smiled, her perfect teeth on full display. You're such a mystery. You know that. You're always so quiet, but I feel like there's so much going on in your head. Benita felt her heart race again. She tried to focus on the notebook in front of her, but all she could think about was how close Kemi was sitting. Kemi leaned in slightly, her tone softer now. I hope you know you can talk to me. I know we don't hang out much, but I think you are really nice. Something in Kemi's words broke through Benita's defenses. For a moment, she forgot about everything, the teasing, the loneliness, the fear. All she saw was someone who cared, someone who was looking at her like she mattered. Before she could stop herself, Benita leaned forward and pressed her lips to Kemi's. It lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. When Benita pulled back, her cheeks flushed. Kemi's eyes widened in shock. What? What are you doing? Kemi stammered, standing up abruptly. I. I thought. Benita began, her voice trembling. You thought what? Kemi's tone was sharp now, her face a mix of confusion and anger. Do you think I'm like that? Is that what you think? I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Before Benita could finish, Kemi slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the empty classroom, and Benita's vision blurred with tears. You are disgusting, Kemi spat, grabbing her bag and storming out of the room. Benita sat there, her cheeks stinging and her heart shattered. She buried her face in her hands, the weight of her mistake crushing her. She had never felt so exposed, so broken. Benita walked home that day in a daze. The streets of her neighborhood buzzed with life, children playing football, women chatting as they carried bags of groceries, and the ever present sound of honking cars from the nearby main road. But for Benita, the world felt distant, like she was moving through a fog. Her cheek still stung where Kemi had slapped her, but that pain was nothing compared to the storm raging inside her chest. She couldn't shake Kemi's words, "You are disgusting." They replayed in her mind, each repetition cutting deeper. What if she tells everyone? Benita whispered to herself, her voice trembling. The thought made her stomach churn. Kemi was popular, and her words carried weight. If she told even one person, the whole school would know. Benita could already imagine the whispers, the stares, the mocking laughter. By the time she reached the gate of her family's compound, her hands were shaking. She pushed it open, slipping inside as quietly as possible. The last thing she wanted was to talk to anyone. Benita! Her mother's voice rang out the moment she stepped into the living room. Benita froze. Her mother was seated on the couch, peeling yams for dinner. Her father sat across from her, reading the newspaper. The television played a Yoruba movie in the background, but neither parent paid it any mind. Yes, ma, Benita answered cautiously. Where are you coming from at this time? Her mother asked, not looking up from her task. School, Benita said softly. School? Her mother finally looked at her, her brow furrowed. By this time, what were you doing there? Loitering? Talking to boys? Benita's eyes widened. No, I wasn't. Her father lowered his newspaper, his expression stern. Are you not ashamed? At your age, instead of focusing on your studies, you are moving up and down like one of those wayward girls. I wasn't doing anything, Benita protested, her voice breaking. Then why are you coming back so late? Her mother demanded. Eh? Do you think we don't know what girls like you are up to? Better not bring shame to this family. Tears welled up in Benita's eyes. I'm not like that. Why do you always assume the worst about me? Because you are always so secretive, her mother snapped. We don't know what you are thinking, what you are doing. You just sulk around the house like someone who doesn't belong here. That last sentence hit Benita like a punch to the gut. Her mother didn't mean it the way it sounded, but to Benita, it felt like confirmation of everything she feared, that she didn't belong, not at school, not at home, not anywhere. Without another word, she turned and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. Benita collapsed onto her bed, burying her face in her pillow to muffle her sobs. She felt like the walls were closing in on her. She was already drowning in shame over what had happened with Kemi. And now, her parents' words added another weight to her chest. You are disgusting. You better not bring shame to this family. You just sulk around the house like someone who doesn't belong here. The words swelled in her mind, each one a stone in the pit of her stomach. Hours passed and the house grew quiet. No one came to check on her. No one knocked on her door. Benita's tears eventually dried, but the heaviness in her heart remained. Later that night, Benita woke up to the sound of the fan creaking overhead. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of streetlights seeping through the curtains. She felt drained, like she had been hollowed out. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Why am I like this? Why can't I just be normal? She thought about Kemi, about the slap, about the way her parents had looked at her earlier. The loneliness she felt was unbearable. Needing a distraction, Benita reached for her phone. She opened her browser and began aimlessly scrolling, looking for something, anything to take her mind off the pain. That's when an idea struck her. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the search bar. Her heart pounded as she typed the words lesbian love. The search results came up, but they didn't feel like what she was looking for. She clicked on a few articles, but they felt too abstract, too distant from her reality. Then her eyes landed on a link at the bottom of the page. Explore your desires here. Benita hesitated again, her breath catching in her throat. She knew what it was, but she had never dared to look. Now, though, curiosity and desperation overpowered her fear. She clicked the link, and a page filled with videos loaded onto her screen. She typed lesbian into the search bar, and a flood of thumbnails appeared. Her cheeks flushed as she clicked on the first video. The sounds and images that followed made her heart race, not with shame, but with something entirely new excitement. For the first time in her life, Benita felt a spark of something she couldn't fully name but knew was real. It wasn't about the women on the screen, it was about her. It was about the part of herself she had buried for so long, finally clawing its way to the surface. As the video played, Benita felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. There was curiosity, excitement, and relief, but there was also guilt and fear. Was this wrong? Would anyone ever understand? When the video ended, Benita put her phone down and stared at the ceiling again. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. Something inside her had changed. Benita didn't plan for it to become a habit. At first, it was something she stumbled upon during those lonely nights when the weight of her thoughts became too much to bear. It began with curiosity, the same kind of curiosity that had led her to watch her first video. She told herself it wasn't a big deal, that everyone did it, that it was just a way to feel good, at least for a little while. She would lie on her bed, her phone screen casting a faint glow in the darkness, and let her thoughts drift. Her hands would wander, tentatively at first, like a hesitant traveler exploring an unfamiliar map. The first time, she felt an odd mix of guilt and exhilaration. She sat up afterward, her heart racing, and stared at her hands like they belonged to someone else. What is wrong with me? She thought. But the next night, the urge came again, and this time it was harder to resist. She started calling it her quiet escape when the loneliness became unbearable. When her parents' words and Kemi's slap replayed in her mind, she sought comfort in the only way she knew how. She didn't call it what it was, not even in her head. It was just something to take the edge off, she told herself. By the time Benita turned 25, her quiet escape was no longer something she did occasionally. It had become a part of her daily life, as natural as breathing. She couldn't fall asleep without it. She couldn't get through a stressful day without knowing she could retreat to her room and let her hands ease the tension. But as the years went by, her simple methods weren't enough. The thrill she once felt was gone, replaced by a hollow routine. She started looking for new ways to feel that same rush, spending hours online searching for videos that could reignite the spark. She tried using different tools, objects she could find around the house, each one an attempt to fill the growing void inside her. The more she indulged, the lonelier she felt. One evening, Benita was at a friend's wedding when a man approached her. He was tall, with a charming smile and an easy laugh. His name was Tunde, and he worked as an engineer in Lagos. Benita, right? He said, offering his hand. Yes, she replied cautiously, unsure why someone like him would want to talk to her. I've been watching you from across the room, he said, smiling. You have a quiet kind of beauty. I like that. Benita froze. A quiet kind of beauty? No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She didn't believe it, but she didn't want to seem rude. Thank you, she said softly. Tunde spent the rest of the evening by her side, asking her about her life, her interests, her dreams. She gave him vague answers, unwilling to open up, but he didn't seem to mind. By the end of the night, he had asked for her number. Benita hesitated. She didn't feel anything for him, not the way she had felt about Kemi, not the way she felt when she watched the women in her videos. But a small part of her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was what she was supposed to do. Maybe if she gave him a chance, she could be normal. Tunde was kind and patient. He called her every day, took her out on dates, and always treated her with respect. Her parents liked him immediately, which only added to the pressure Benita felt. You are so lucky, her mother said one afternoon. A good man like Tunde doesn't come around often. Don't mess this up. Benita forced a smile, nodding as though she agreed. But every time Tunde touched her, holding her hand, wrapping his arm around her shoulder, she felt nothing but discomfort. She avoided his kisses, always making excuses about being tired or not feeling well. At night, in the privacy of her room, she would return to her old habits. She would scroll through her phone, searching for the kind of connection she couldn't find in real life. And for a few brief moments, she would feel something close to satisfaction. But afterward, the loneliness would creep back in, stronger than ever. One night, Tunde confronted her after dropping her off at her apartment. Benita, can I ask you something? He said, leaning against his car. Of course, she replied, though her stomach churned with unease. Do you even like me? The question caught her off guard. What? Why would you ask that? Because I don't know, he said, running a hand through his hair. Sometimes it feels like you are holding back, like you are keeping me at a distance. Benita looked down at her feet, unable to meet his gaze. I do like you, she said quietly. You're a good man. But he pressed. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? How could she tell him that her heart was drawn to a love she wasn't allowed to have, that she was living a lie because it was easier than facing the truth? Instead, she said nothing. Tunde sighed and gave her a sad smile. I'll wait for you to let me in, Benita. But I can't wait forever. She nodded, feeling a pang of guilt, but also relief. She knew she was hurting him, but she didn't know how to stop. Benita's life had become a circle she couldn't escape. Every day felt the same. Wake up, go to work, talk to Tunde just enough to keep him around, and then retreat into her room at night for her quiet escape. The loneliness inside her was growing like a tumor, eating away at her. She had tried to stop before, many times. She had told herself that if she could just go one day without touching herself, maybe she could start to feel normal again. But the urges always came back, stronger than before, leaving her feeling weaker, more ashamed. One evening, after a particularly tense conversation with Tunde about their relationship, Benita found herself sitting on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her chest felt tight, her mind buzzing with thoughts she couldn't quiet. She reached for her phone, scrolling through the same videos she had watched countless times. But even they felt empty now, like a hollow echo of the connection she craved. Her eyes wandered to the empty Coca Cola bottle on her bedside table. Benita stared at the bottle, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know where the idea came from. It was like a whisper in the back of her mind, a suggestion she didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't ignore. Her fingers twitched, the urge building inside her like a storm. She told herself it was ridiculous, dangerous even, but the thought wouldn't go away. It's just one time, she whispered to herself, her voice shaky, just to see if it feels different. She picked up the bottle, running her fingers along its smooth surface. Her hands trembled as she lay back on the bed, the dim light of her room casting long shadows on the walls. At first, it seemed to work. The cool glass felt strange but exciting, and for a brief moment, Benita felt the rush she had been chasing for years. But as she adjusted the bottle, something went wrong. She felt a sharp pain that made her freeze. Her eyes widened as she realized what had happened. No, 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 she whispered, panic rising in her chest. God, no, she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she tried to think of what to do. Benita called up on the bed, clutching her stomach as waves of pain and fear washed over her. She couldn't go to the hospital. How would she even explain this? What would they think of her? Her mind raced with shame and self loathing. What is wrong with me? Why did I do this? Why can't I just be normal? For hours, she lay there, too afraid to move, too ashamed to call for help. As the night dragged on, Benita realized she couldn't fix this on her own. The pain was unbearable, and she knew she was risking something far worse if she didn't get help. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone and dialed Tunde's number. Hello? Her voice was groggy, laced with confusion. Tunde, Benita's voice cracked, and she broke into sobs. Benita, what's wrong? Are you okay? I I need help, she whispered. What's going on? Are you hot? Yes, she said, her voice barely audible. Where are you? I'm coming right now. Tunde arrived within minutes, his face a mix of concern and panic as he helped her into the car. Benita, what happened? He asked, glancing at her pale face and the way she clutched her stomach. I don't want to talk about it, she said, her voice shaky. Okay, he said softly, respecting her silence. Just hold on, we are almost there. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Benita's mind was consumed with shame and fear. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never been before. At the hospital, the doctors asked her what had happened. Benita couldn't bring herself to explain, mumbling something about an accident. They didn't press her, but she could see the pity in their eyes. When it was over, she lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Tunde sat beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. Benita, he said softly, whatever happened, you don't have to go through it alone. Please, talk to me. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of everything she had been carrying. The loneliness, the shame, the secrets. It was all too much. I'm broken, Tunde, she whispered. I've been broken for a long time. His grip on her tightened. You are not broken, Benita. You are hurting. And I'm here. Please, let me help you. Benita didn't know if she could believe him. But in that moment, his words were the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. Benita stayed in the hospital for 2 days. The physical pain from her injuries faded quickly compared to the emotional scars she carried. Tunde stayed by her side the entire time, quiet but supportive, never pushing her for answers. When they returned to her apartment, he made sure she was settled before sitting down across from her. Benita, he said gently, I know you don't want to talk about what happened, but you scared me. I thought I was going to lose you. Please, let me in. Whatever it is, we can face it together. Benita looked at him, her heart heavy with guilt and gratitude. Tunde was a good man. kind, patient, everything her parents had ever wanted for her. But he wasn't what she wanted. And for the first time, she realized that wasn't her fault. Tunde, she began, her voice trembling. You've been so good to me, more than I deserve. That's not true, he said, shaking his head. You deserve love, Benita. You deserve someone who sees you and accepts you for who you are. His words hit her like a wave. She had spent so much of her life hiding, hiding from others, hiding from herself. She had tried to force herself into boxes that didn't fit, hoping it would make her feel normal. But all it had done was deepen her pain. I can't give you what you want, she said softly. What do you mean? Tunde asked, his brow furrowed. Benita took a deep breath, her heart pounding. I'm not like other women. I've always known I was different, but I was too scared to say it loud. Tunde, I'm a lesbian. The words hung in the air, heavy and freeing all at once. Tunde blinked, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Benita feared the worst. Then he exhaled deeply and nodded. I think I've always known, he said quietly. You, you have? Not exactly, he admitted. But I could feel there was a part of you I couldn't reach, no matter how hard I tried. I thought maybe it was me. But now I see it wasn't about that. It's just who you are. Tears welled in Benita's eyes. I'm so sorry, Tunde. I never meant to hurt you. He reached across the table and took her hand. You didn't hurt me, Benita. If anything, I'm glad you are finally being honest with me and with yourself. You deserve to live your truth. That conversation marked a turning point for Benita. For the first time, she allowed herself to see her identity not as a flaw, but as a part of who she was, a part she needed to accept and nurture. She began attending therapy, where she unpacked years of shame, self loathing, and loneliness. It wasn't easy. There were days when she wanted to quit, days when the weight of her past felt too heavy to carry. But slowly, she began to heal. She learned to set boundaries with her family, no longer allowing their expectations to dictate her life. She explained to her parents, as delicately as she could, that she needed to focus on herself and her own happiness. They didn't fully understand, but they respected her decision. Tunde remained a friend, offering support from a distance. Their relationship changed, but the bond they had built didn't break. By the time Benita turned 30, she had built a new life for herself. She moved to a new city, started a new job, and joined a small LGBTQ plus support group. For the first time, she was surrounded by people who understood her struggles, who celebrated her for who she was. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the scars of her past threatened to pull her back into darkness. But she had learned how to face those moments with grace and strength. She had learned that she didn't need to rely on anyone or anything to fill the void inside her. Benita looked at herself in the mirror one morning, and for the first time in years, she didn't see a stranger. She saw a woman who had fought through pain and loneliness, who had made mistakes but refused to let them define her. She saw a woman who was finally learning to love herself. Benita never found the kind of romantic love she had dreamed of in her novels, but she found something just as important: peace. And in that peace, she discovered that love, real, honest love, starts from within.